welcome to our Mayple event. Hi, Erika.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me today.
We're super excited to have you here. Erika is the head of SEO branding at Semrush. So we're super excited to have this talk today. We've been going through different events in Mayple, covering different aspects. And I think, this specific event means a lot personally to me. And also Ben that helped, coordinate everything here. SEO is a major part of Mayple as well, and what we do in order for, for us to grow and for our specific growth. So we've gone through a long journey with it. So I'm super excited to have this interview with you. Just before we dig in, just to tell everyone, again, thank you so much for joining us today. From one hand, we're going through some tough days in Israel, but on the other hand, meeting you all here and being on such events brings us back to life. We're being resilient here together with all of you. So thank you for joining. As you know, we're running those events every month in order to bring really the top minds and the top thought leaders in each space. And today we have Erika with us, who's responsible for building the connection as the SEO head of SEO branding in Semrush, building meaningful connections between Semrush and the SEO community. So welcome, SEO community, part of it at least, it's here. So she's obviously leading content, bringing new insights out of it, and really creating a lot of value for the SEO community out there, including us and including you. You were previously the head of organic search, right? So you've gone through a journey in your company.
Yeah, and a few other roles as well. Yeah, sure. This is the latest one. It's quite fresh. It's like 2-3 months old now, so it's still a baby of a role.
I love the title. It's always like you see a title like that, you have to ask. I mean,
I get that a lot. But I'm happy to answer all your questions today. As I said, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me, and I hope we bring value to everyone watching us today.
Amazing. Okay, so let's get started.
Yeah.
So you're head of SEO branding in Semrush. You see a lot, right? You see businesses, you see SEO experts, you see the whole industry from your perspective, which is really covering a lot of data and a lot of information. What are the key strategies that you see right now that, and I'm taking you to the bottom line at the beginning of the interview, I know, but what would be the key strategies that you believe are the most essential ones for companies that's really trying to succeed? And we know how ever-changing, landscape it is right now with search. Always, and now AI is involved in everything. So what would be the top strategies, the key strategies you think companies should look at?
Thank you. Okay, yes, starting with some really heavy stuff here.
Yeah. Like, okay, just give us the whole shebang.
Yeah, but look, I think before diving into specific, let's say, types of strategies, right, is what we see in search. And even today we had announcements from Google about things that change in search, how much more personalization we'll start seeing in the results. We all expect SGE to launch in even more countries and languages soon. So the landscape is changing fast from Google's side, right? What we also see is like tons of updates from Google, like core updates, helpful content updates, and the messaging being more and more about, or in many occasions being like, okay, if you see your visibility dropping, it's not like necessarily you're doing something wrong. It's just maybe you're not doing everything right, or as right as someone else who outranks you. So I think this is becoming especially hard for businesses and small businesses to navigate that landscape of like, okay, what am I doing? However, although I'm not an optimist in general, I what I do see is maybe that huge gap that we were seeing in marketing all these years between big companies, big brands versus the small fish, and how they could compete in the SERPs. I want to be an optimist and say that actually now I see the way things are changing, making it a bit more accessible, and I'll explain more. So in terms of the strategies, right? Before talking about tactics or about things we can pay attention to, whether a small or big brand, my first suggestion would be, regardless of your size, remember also it's hard times financially, even for the big companies, right? Budgets get slashed, marketing teams also, there are layoffs and everything. The first thing you look at is what kind of strategy or approach can be repeatable or scalable. So I'm sure in marketing, there are tons of voices and ideas coming from people, and that's a great thing. However, how you do what matters is one of the criteria I think needs to become more and more. If this is successful, can it scale? Can it be repeated, right? Or is it a one-off? It doesn't mean that one-off things like a great campaign doesn't matter, but I think when you find that kind of great spot where something can bring results and then you can scale it, or you can repeat it, that is definitely something to prioritize. These are not always the strategies or the proposals that make for applause in the room or exciting execs, but these can also be like smaller things that scaled or repeated can yield great results, right? Without necessarily a huge cost or or a big risk maybe that you see some other times. So that would be my first advice. Kind of like any strategy you build, factor that in. It is especially important in the times we're at. Number two would be that in SEO historically and today, acquiring links, for example, has been important. What I see, and that is not just lately, but I think lately even Google has become more vocal, or more people in our industry, I'm not sure, because Google has been saying that for a while, is don't look at links as like link building or link buying, or I'll do something, or I'll write something, I'll do a campaign to get some links. Look more into the wider scheme, which is anything you put out is also a brand building exercise. And how you stand out in search is how you stand out among audiences as well. Is like, do you have a brand, and what do other people say about you? What does that brand mean to people? So prioritize things that tie into your kind of overall image, your overall brand, that can also bring then relevant people to you, not just some backlinks for some reason. I would argue that getting relevant mentions even is way more important now than getting some links that you may acquire. And then I would say the third part of it is like any type of strategy or your approach to your strategy. Factor into this large language models. Like we collectively call everything AI nowadays, but factor that in a sense of, do not take the shortcut and believe that, okay, I have ChatGPT, for example, I don't need writers anymore, I can write so much content now. But think of it like, how can it help me scale, repeat, speed up processes, maybe cover gaps that I don't, knowledge gaps in the team or skills gaps, and leverage the power that you get through that. These tools are really important to use nowadays, but it is also equally important to use them in the right way, because otherwise you may still be wasting your time and not seeing results. So I would start with these three, I would say, overarching, I don't know what to call them, principles, but they can tie into different types of strategies. But I think it's the the bird's eye view you need to have of any kind of strategy you adopt in the end, and factor these things into it.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, just to sum it up for myself even, and for everyone that's here with us, first, make sure it's scalable. So if you find something that is repetitive and can be used and actually you see success out of it, make sure it's also scalable and you can actually repeat it at scale. Second, make sure that your link building is more of a PR, I would say even.
Yeah, all of
Not like
those things
PR traditionally, yeah.
are used in conjunction, but I would say don't call it PR, don't call it link building. See it in connection with your brand. Anything you do, or most of the things you are doing in terms of content or campaign or PR, should be adding to your brand value. Let's call it brand value. Okay, don't see them in isolation as I'll do something to get 10 links. It doesn't matter.
And in regards to AI, which is a huge question of its own, I would say, obviously utilizing it makes sense. I think many people are asking themselves, if everyone will start just using AI to create tons of content, what would, then happen, right?
It's already happening, by the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we already see Google and everyone catching up on that front. So yeah, I have some ideas about that, but definitely, like, it's the thing that says when everyone runs towards one direction, then who stands out is probably not just the idea of I have a login to ChatGPT and then boom, all my problems are solved. Also, it is a part of educating ourselves and our teams on what these tools can do. Right? They're large language models. They're not the answer to everything. They are not doing everything right. They do need that kind of human intervention at different stages. But on the other hand, they can do an amazing job from, I would say, even like personal assistant tasks to content creation, scaling content, structuring, analyzing. It's great. They can do a great job, but it doesn't just form the answer to all our problems. Unfortunately, not yet. Who knows?
Yes, maybe. I hope. I think also Google will educate us, right? I mean, eventually the algorithm will change accordingly.
Well, theoretically, not theoretically, we see like it's the systems and the algorithm are changing all the time, and that will not stop. I cannot even begin to imagine how big of a challenge that is for Google as well. But there you have things like EAT or WEAT. So, experience, for example, got added to expertise, authority, trust. And experience is right now, by definition, a human kind of skill, right? A human attribute. And we do see results changing, and like if I don't want to call it favoritism, it sounds negative, but you see results from user generated sites like Reddit, for example, doing much better in search. So experience, perspectives, you have the filters at the top of the search results, sort of showing you more perspectives. And today we even got announcement about like individual notes and having more personalization. So that actually shows us a way, right? It shows us a perspective of like, okay, your expertise, your authority are very important. But that for me was an interesting turn, because it shows the value that unique voices have in terms of how what we see makes sense, right? We also see tons of content online that adds no value or very little value, and maybe I should be nice, but I won't. So it doesn't mean that this just happened with AI, right? Writers, content marketers, SEO, everyone kind of got into this habit over the years of just checking what ranks at the top and then rehashing it a bit, phrasing it a bit differently, and thinking that makes a difference. Okay. Well, it doesn't. And now with AI, the scale of this is becoming greater and greater, right? Because AI can rehash everything in minutes, and you'll get very little added value on top of that. However, now, from the web becoming so immense to just index and show everything, let alone when it has so much little value, it does show us the way that, yes, it's not a bad thing or not. Like, sometimes we tend to say, okay, what did John Miller say or Google say? They said this, and then we interpret it towards the edge, right? So links are not good. Oh, links are great. What I see is that it is a tool. It's fine to use. It's like, it doesn't violate any policies or anything. Like, Google itself uses AI, but is, what do you bring to the equation that no one else does? And that is where we should be focusing. We should be focusing on what is the value that we're bringing to our audiences through our content, through our website, through our activities, through our brand, through our sales. It goes way beyond marketing, of course, right? And I think that's where the game will be at.
So uniqueness and authenticity becomes a bigger part of search as well.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. And it's interesting that you get some sectors that it's a bit more complicated, like your money or your life, health or finance, insurance. But then what I find interesting is that, Google talks about perspectives. We're talking about user generated content. We're not necessarily talking about expert content. And that's a distinction that I think sometimes we're missing, right? But, surfacing more and more social content. Google understands that people are not just searching on Google, right? So how does Google create an experience for its users, right? Is through those perspectives that do not need to come just from experts. I'm just raising there a flag. It's engagement and firsthand experience is super important. And recently I thought Danny Sullivan gave a very good example of like travel blogs, right? And not being able, for example, to find photos or images of travel bloggers on their blogs, of having actually been somewhere. So again, there's a question around the authenticity of that content and what real actual value it brings. So I'm not saying that everything you do, you should take pictures, but plus those can also be created very easily now with AI. But what I'm saying is that unique experience that each one carries and can bring into our content and our strategy definitely can make a change.
Yep. In some sense, Google is also drawn into the social media, and actually empowers it even more than what it is right now.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic. I don't know how many of us remember Google Plus. Like, raise a hand in the chat if you do. Somehow, raise a hand. But that didn't go very well. However, I think we've seen it with Google multiple times, right? You have, for example, travel aggregators, and then also Google shows you results. You have dictionaries, Google shows you definitions and instant answer for things. I don't necessarily think Google wants to act as a social kind of media, but what it does create, it wants to create holistic experiences, right? You imagine Google users, they jump off search to go to websites, to social media, to search directly on an aggregator or an Amazon, right? So all of the features we see, I see them as features to keep engaging users within the platform. So surfacing content from places that Google knows and understands people go to interact is great, because for them, like, the experience for a user becomes better. You no longer see just 10 links and you have to go to every site. You see filters. You can make your search much better. If you're more interested in videos versus social media content versus a long guide, all of those things are within one thing. Like 10 years ago, you would probably have to do 20 different searches and 10 different platforms for that. So in terms of experience, I think, my hat is off to Google, because it does take into account that people don't just search on Google.
A complete journey on Google.
Let's see. I know this is not what many people want to hear. So the conversation is, I will take all our traffic away.
Talking about journeys, you've gone through a very interesting journey in content and search and branding. What would you say were, the most pivotal moments or experiences that really shaped the way that you perceive SEO and digital branding, and how do you see it's influencing your work in Semrush today?
Okay. Oh, so I think the first such moment was before I even went into, let's call it online marketing, because I've gone through a few different things, but because I started as a journalist, right, and an editor for publications. So for me, that start to my career gave me so many insights into how content works, how it resonates with different audiences, because I also was lucky enough to work on very different publications. So that attention to detail, from copywriting to different formats, really helped me tons and helps me even today. So that for sure has shaped a lot how I approach content marketing, for example. Then probably my first role in online marketing, because it was, I wanted to make the move from journalism to SEO, but I knew nothing about SEO, and I hadn't ever had a chance to work on it. So it was an online marketing exec role. But what that meant at an agency, what that meant is that, again, I was given, like, depending on the client, I was given different things to do. So I got a chance to work on SEO, I got a chance to work on content, link building at the time, social media. So for me, it was great. It opened up like a ton of opportunity there because of how much hands-on experience I was able to get. I wouldn't say pivotal moments, but it did give me some great insights when I started like getting to work on clients like in e-com or fintech or SaaS, some very competitive industries with very specific criteria sometimes, or restrictions, right? And then being able to sort of propose strategies and see them getting implemented. Changed my mind about a few things at the time, but also because I was lucky enough to do that back in 2012, 2011, 2013, when there was a massive shift towards content and user-centric content, right? I also, I think, was lucky enough to have some crazy clients who said yes to many things, but it did allow me to see what works, what doesn't work, and the progress of that through the years, right? Something that didn't work in 2012, I feel that eventually Google caught up, like, because we've heard think about the user for many years, but there's also that element of like, okay, sometimes some things are still lagging behind in terms of the algorithm, maybe. And yeah, then I think the the launch of Hummingbird or RankBrain brought immense change, not just to my career, but to everyone's career in SEO. And it did change our perception and how we, as users, how we interact with search, as SEOs, content marketers, or even business owners who want to grow their visibility, how we perceive content and what content we put out. So yeah, and probably the first time I built a team myself, which was theoretically about content, but I didn't choose to have just writers. So I went for a team that had very diverse skills, and even the things they liked were very different. We didn't necessarily have the clients yet to do everything, but for me it was very apparent at the time. That was around 2014, 2015. It was very apparent that you cannot have a successful content marketing program by just having content writers form a team. So yeah, that also taught me a lot, both as a manager and as someone who does SEO.
I think team building around content in general, in marketing, but specifically around content, is very challenging for a lot of brands, right? It's exactly not knowing, okay, so should I just have two content writers, three content writers, give them a list of blog posts they need to, to write, and that's it? What should I do? Can you tell us a little bit more about
That's a very tough question, because obviously it depends a lot on, your business, your budget, your needs, your strategy, if you already have it. Um, my my recommendation would be, when thinking about it, well, first of all, there are two sides to that, right? It's like the value you need to add to your business, and then it's also a matter of, from their perspective and from a team perspective, how does that team grow, right? It's not about, oh, will I keep my stuff forever? Like, no one can answer that. But it's a question of, is that also scalable? That's also part of your strategy, right? So I feel that just by looking for a very specific set of skills when you're building a content team in house, let's say, is probably not the best way to go about it, because then you end up with a very uniform approach. When you're thinking or building your content marketing program, what you want to do actually is to bring in diverse voice, skills, and backgrounds. Um, and in our industry, many people's like journeys until they get to this stage are very different, right? I know people who started as teachers, as statisticians, or as anything else, like crazy things, and routes that people have taken to end up in SEO or content. So from my side, what I would suggest is, look at the real needs and prioritize skills, but also look at the characteristics of the people. You want people with content. I find that you want people who are really invested in it. Don't see it as like a 9 to 5 job and just some words. Dare to get more creative people on board. That can be a huge asset, even if you think like, for now we're just going to do some blog posts, which I would question how important it is, but that's a whole other topic. But you want people who can take you and carry you a step further, right? Who are passionate about it, who may just start a content project for the business because they love it so much and they can see the value. And then many times I've been surprised by the results that brings. Think of the structure within the team. With content, is not about the production part only, right? It's also, who checks that content. Do you actually need, editors? Do you need, which industry are you in? Do you need technical writers? Would that be more beneficial? Do you need them to know SEO and understand SEO so they can work on that aspect as well, or not? So there are so many different parts in this equation that differ for everyone. But my real genuine suggestion would be, do not go with a specific profile in mind. I find that with content, that's very limiting. And do not necessarily go for repeating the same profile across your team. Dare to be more imaginative with who you bring on board.
I love what you just said, and especially what you just said about bring creative people. It kind of breaks the rules maybe, and also takes you out of the scheme of how, the technical way of doing SEO. And it really, it also relates to what you said at the beginning on authenticity, uniqueness, always be kind of in the forefront of, content and that is related to your brand. I think many brands don't understand it, that they don't just need to write about a specific topic because it ranks, right? That's the kind of
Yeah, and doing that and succeeding is great, but don't we all want that? But it's more to do with your content can generate much bigger value than you can forecast right now, or not come even close to what you want. But a big part of that comes from that team you build. So choose wisely. And the other thing I just thought of is, like, depending on your budget, depending on how you're moving ahead as a business, some skills are not directly associated with writing. But if you have, for example, someone who's a skilled editor, or someone who's a skilled writer but also great at managing external teams and project managing, right? There's probably a space for that kind of person in a team that scales or will be scaling soon. Not all your content needs need to be covered in-house. So the lower the budget, I think the smarter you need to get with the skills that you bring on board, and how you structure that kind of program going forward.
Yeah, great insights. For me, it's, I really write it down because, we have the vetting team at Mayple, which also matches our experts to brands that come to us. And we have obviously a community of SEO experts as well. And, having those insights, that it's not only about the skill set, it's also about the additional skills that they have on top of those, which is not only the channel. Is exactly where, the matching gets interesting, right?
Yeah.
Exactly doing it there.
Yeah.
Who's going to take you to the next step?
Yeah. And I think with writers and content teams, everyone's expectations, or not everyone's, often I think the expectations are like, okay, you're a writer, you can do everything. The answer is simply no. And in my experience, writers who are amazing at one kind of thing, they may suck at another. It doesn't make them bad writers. It's oftentimes it is the sign of a great writer who has specialized in something and can bring tremendous value. So I think with content, because it is very accessible, right? We're not developers. We're, someone writes code and 9 out of 10 people in a room would not be able to read the code and understand if it's correct or not. With words, it's very different. But the idea is that, do not expect your writers or your editors or your team to do everything, provided it needs just words, and be there to see those gaps as well, so you understand how you cover the rest of it. Maybe you don't need a great copywriter right now, and maybe your team doesn't have to have that skill. It doesn't mean that when you need it, though, they can double up as great copywriters. So that's also like a disclaimer for content.
For sure. Talking about mistakes, things are changing. We know it. AI is here with us. We know it. And I think that with all those new trends that we're seeing and the new tools out there, the big, the risk for a mistake is just, getting higher. What would you say are the biggest mistakes that you think brands should, avoid from doing, having all these trends around us?
So, okay, so I think let's start with something that maybe not a mistake, but can lead to mistakes. Is and I'm talking about SEO, organic visibility, content, that kind of part of search, is trying to fix everything all at once. Many times that's not feasible. Many times I would argue it doesn't make sense. So, you have your tech side of things in SEO, you have your content, you have your, let's say, authority or brand building and link building. I don't even want to call it link building, but anyway, you have your authority part of it. Then trying, let's say, to fix everything on the technical side, right, is not necessarily the best way forward. So I think not prioritizing is a mistake that costs time resources, budget, and then you're losing more time, which in search and with all the developments as well is of the essence. Now, to that, then I'm leading to the part of prioritization and how do we prioritize, right? Often in search, I see prioritization being made based on the wrong kind of KPIs, or I don't want to call them vanity. They're not necessarily vanity metrics, but in times, especially like now, you want your SEO to contribute to the business bottom line. You always want that. You want every channel in marketing and your activity to do that. So I would be very careful, and I would prioritize also based on what can I predict the impact on the things that matter for the business being, even if, again, they don't make for the best presentation to the CEO or the president or someone. But at the end of the day, the question I sometimes ask my team or someone I'm discussing is, what would you prefer, to get 10,000 more visits in a month or 10K more in terms of revenue? There is no right or wrong answer. It depends on the stage your business is at, right? Sometimes you want the traffic through that because you're building something, you're building awareness around something, and you don't expect conversions. Conversely, other times, you should be more interested in that. So choosing KPIs and choosing what you work towards is important so you can prioritize correctly. Of course, I would mention not using AI and tools and large language models. AI, let's call them AI from now on, just for the sake of it. I've made my point of like this being mainly large language models for now, but not using it to streamline and speed up processes. I think you're missing out if you're not doing it, if you're not getting your team savvy to test things, if you're not going through them for a lot of your output. And then I think the bigger mistake would be not to look at your content, not to look at the kind of messaging that's out there as a brand for SEO, no matter what you do it for, is not to look at the content you already have and update and upgrade it if it needs to do that, and really not looking how you're building that trust and that authority for your company, for your brand, and what's out there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the one thing that we're all doing sometimes, I guess, is planning everything.
I do that as well, so I'm not going to pretend to be much smarter, but yeah.
Well, we have a very long list of things that we're going to do in a month, and it typically doesn't work like that, right? Focus is something that can't be overrated in prioritization, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the times we see also businesses that are kind of caught up in a situation where their things are not linear, right? They plan, they do, things look good, and then things change. You said at the beginning, the algorithm changed, something changes, no one knows exactly what, but results are not looking the same. And then they change, right? They change their plan. Do you think it's the right approach there?
That's a very tricky question. So in principle, I would say that regardless of external changes, I'm always on the side of that ability to change and adapt, especially in marketing. It may not be Google, it might be your clients, it might be a new competitor that entered the market. There are so many reasons why in marketing you will have to revisit and adjust your strategy. So I think, yes, generally in principle, changing is good. It doesn't mean losing sight. If you have your North Star where you want to go, I'm not saying that from one day to the next, a business that is set to do A within, 5 years needs to change everything and do something completely different. That would be mental. But how you get there, yes, I think needs to change quite often. especially nowadays. But what I would suggest, right, when it comes to search, for example, the guidance hasn't really changed that much. Like, I know there's tons of developments all the time. There's algorithms, algorithm updates. There's new systems launching. There's tons of things, but the real principles around what to do and the guidance around it hasn't really changed. If anything, it has become a little more transparent from Google as well. Um, so if, for example, every update that happens is a surprise, and you see tons of changes in your visibility, I would argue that there's probably a deeper issue in the strategy, and yes, we should look at it. Not that it doesn't happen, that perfectly fine and solid strategies do not get reward. I'm not saying that Google gets it right all the time, but I'm saying if it's becoming a bit mental, then yes, we should probably reconsider some things. Otherwise, stay ahead of the developments. Be very clear on your priorities. That can help you understand also the level of change needed, right? I would argue that priorities, maybe not all of them, but a big part of the priorities cannot change that easily all the time. You may change the how you get them, how you implement them. You may need to adjust budgets or something, but the priorities themselves, I would argue, that rarely have to be changed that much, like 180 degrees. So yeah, that's what I would say. Be on the side of change, but for a good cause. Don't just start changing everything every time there's something launching, right? That is not the best reason to change everything.
Yes. Eventually, the content is for your users, right?
Yeah,
that's
and
that's the audience.
yeah, exactly. And then, but you have new products launching, as I said, or competitors entering the market, or um just the market changes, right? The trends, the financial. So yeah, you have to be there and listen carefully. But if you know your audience and that hasn't changed drastically, then some of the principles should be solid. And just reconsider, maybe if it's not successful how you do things, reconsider the way of doing things.
We're nearly coming to the end of the session, and I
Wow.
think before we leave enough time for Q&As, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions from people who joined here. I see the comments already, and it's really exciting to see you participate. So, feel free to start putting out those questions. Ben from our team will be able to, put them on the screen. And obviously, Erika will be here to help answer them. But just before that, and feel free to think about questions in the meantime. We talked about a lot of new tools and new trends that are coming up. What is the number one innovation that really excites you the most towards 2024?
I would lie if I said I'm not excited for SG. I know it's not a tool, right? But for search, for me at least, it will be I don't know, for many people, not just for me. It can bring cataclysmic changes. I think Danny Sullivan said recently, brace yourselves for something else, but I'm using it for SG. But what I was discussing with someone the other day is that arguably we should no longer call it SEO, like search engine optimization. We should go more to SEO, but that would cause a lot of other problems, as like conversation engine optimization. And that's the trend, that's the shift from Google. That brings shifts from users, right? I'm no longer using Google just to type in something and then just select the result. I'm using it to converse. And that is a huge shift in all our behaviors. So I am really interested and curious to see how things develop there. I'm not able to say, we can see opportunities for businesses through that. Also, like, there are voices that say that, it will impact negatively a lot of the businesses. all I can say is like no one knows for now, and this is developing and will be developing. Right now it's it's not even launched everywhere. It's not accessible for a big part of the world. So let's see. But that for me is probably the biggest thing that we need to be talking about.
And I know it's still theoretically, but it will bring more engagement opportunities at the end of the day.
For Google, yes. But let's see. Like, obviously there are signs that attribution becomes better in SG. So linking through, maybe it's your opportunity to also be featured higher up, whereas before SG you were like result number 10 and no one was ever seeing you. So I don't want I've promised myself I will not be saying this when I'm talking about SEO. It depends, but that for me, that is also another reason. There's tons of reasons, but it's another reason why you want to be building your brand. Even if people do not click through to come to a result, like a page with the content, right? If you're building your brand, if you're constantly there, it is an indirect but a great way to influence people when they come closer to making a purchasing decision or recognizing your brand and your product. So yeah, there's a lot of different angles that someone can look at it from.
And if you can just explain what is
Yeah,
to Ben
so
and to the rest of us.
for sure. So SG search generative experience. This is what is called. It started as a test in very few markets, like initially in the US, then to India and Japan, and last week in 120 more countries, I think. But essentially, this is a part on the Google search results pages where you no longer see at the top, like the listings of the pages ranking. What you see is an AI generated answer that compiles content from different websites and packages it all together into an answer. So theoretically, or arguably, many of the users would no longer have to click in results, but it does give you opportunities to link, to ask a follow-up question, so it becomes a lot more conversational.
As we said, more engagement for Google.
Yeah.
Ben, do we have any questions for our Q&A? Guys, feel free to post them here. I see people that were logged in from Arizona and from Greece and London and
Greece. Sorry, I'm Greek. I couldn't. I'm excited for everyone that is here. By the way, sorry.
Amazing.
Okay, so
I love this.
I see a question from Ben as well. What cool events? Am I okay to? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, what cool events and plans do you have for the SEO experts community at Semrush? Ooh, okay. So, events, plans, different things. So, right now, as I said, I'm 2 months into this role, so I am building also still some plans for next year. The one thing I will say for sure is that we're going to try to meet our community more out there, whether within other events and conferences taking place or organizing some things ourselves. That is like a very vague answer, I am aware, but I cannot make any commitments yet because it's not just dependent on me as well. There's other teams working on these things too. But the other thing is like the way I see my role is like I'm very approachable. Like I'm usually responding very quickly on LinkedIn. I'm very bad with Twitter, although as an SEO I shouldn't say that. But anyway, that's it. So people can also reach out to me and to us at Semrush with ideas or with with things that they think would bring value to them and to their community and their businesses, and sort of address it in a way that makes sense, whether it is to speak with product teams or other teams internally, or just take it on board and do something with it, but definitely making us as a whole a bit more accessible in that way. So yeah, all I can say is stay tuned. I'm sure there will be some good things announced later on. Okay, so when SG comes, how can Google ensure the information they're pulling is factual? I've seen instances where the answer credited by AI is incorrect. So that's a great question. I not necessarily profess to have the right answer to that, but I'll give it a go. So SGE initially as a test, right? It didn't, for example, include links to the sources that it quoted. So there was a big argument about that, or a big conversation around, okay, how do we know where these are from? How do we know if they're true? I would take it beyond SG. Right now, it does quote and cite its sources. So it does link through to results that you would probably also see in the search results page. The question becomes, like, how does Google fact check things when it surfaces them, right? And you know that they have like their kind of like they've put a lot of work behind when it comes to hate speech, when it comes to scientific topics that can cause and stir a lot of tension. That's the word I was looking for. So they do have systems in place as well to demote content that incites some kind of like very negative situations. They have different systems for freshness, for example, because sometimes what is accurate has to do with just very rapid developments, like if we're talking about the weather and the storm coming, right? So they do have all these systems. They've had them for a long time, and obviously they keep building on them. How we can ensure that everything there is 100% accurate, I don't know. My guess is that probably won't be 100% accurate. It pulls information from other sources to a degree, or to the biggest degree. Those other sources theoretically should be there because they have good, engaging information. The difference here being good and engaging. So engaging and popular, let's call them popular. Popular doesn't always mean scientifically correct, right? So I do think Google will step up their game, especially when it comes to like your money or your life, health. They have already, like in the, let's say, what do we call them? Normal search results. Like you do see credible sources, you do see content that comes from experts or is reviewed by scientific community, right? Ranking more. On the other hand, you also see health topics now ranking conversations on Reddit. So even then I wonder, like, okay, who has checked this? Is this true? So I do think they will need to up their game. I do think they will do it. Maybe we will see. That's like a long guess now. So my view is that they will need to do it more and better for those sensitive kind of industries and topics. But theoretically, with citing your sources, AI will not be hallucinating as much. It will just be combining things that were there into something digestible for us. But let's see.
Sounds like a huge challenge for everyone.
Oh my God, who's my favorite team member at Semrush? Oh no. I've worked with so many different teams over the years that I don't think I can answer. I don't want to say my CMO or anyone. I hope I'm not fired. So I will say someone someone else. This is probably the hardest question ever. Okay, I'll choose just a person I work with for many years. We're no longer in the same team though, so I don't know if it counts. But it was a member I recruited for the organic search team for the content side of the team. And he's now, he started as a writer, then became editor. Now he's content strategist, and he's doing an amazing job. His name is Connor, by the way. So Connor, if you're watching, he's in Norway. I don't even know what time it is in Norway now. It must be late. But yeah, Connor is one of the smartest and hardworking people I know. So there you go. He's got his call out.
What's your favorite place in Greece?
My favorite place in Greece. Oh my god. Oh, they're getting harder and harder, the questions. I think it's a more like sentimental place. So for me, where I used to spend a lot of my childhood, like summers and Easters, was in a very non-touristy part of Greece, which is mainland Greece, around the lake. So yeah, Athens is, sorry, I just saw it. Athens is where I was until I came to the UK, so I will always love Athens. It will be top. But sentimentally speaking, it's a place in central Greece where my grandma was, and a lot of other like uncles and cousins, and it's combined with some amazing memories. So yeah, I would say that, but Athens as well. So yeah, I can say too.
It's a beautiful country, and with the super nice people.
Thank you.
Everyone here loves Greece, so it's
thank you. I do as well. I missed it.
Yeah. Quite of a different weather than in the UK.
Yeah, definitely. That for sure. But it's fine. Like I'm told by everyone that they're fed up with the good weather. I think it only changed the last few days. So while we're fed up with the rain here, you have people in Greece being fed up of the good weather. So that's an irony that exists in my life all the time.
Yeah. Nice. Erika, thank you so much. It was super educating and so many insights and things to think about also after this interview. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me today. I really had a great time. I hope we helped people as well with what we discussed, but thank you for the invitation and for having me.
It's our pleasure. Thank you. And everyone, thank you so much for joining. We hope to see you in our next event. We have big plans, so stay tuned. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.